Yeah, we've got 15.
Great. Well, I'm going to kick it off. Good evening. I'm Sarah Day Evans, the founder and CEO for Accelerating Appalachia. We're really excited that you have joined on to be a part of our first webinar for our new program, Building Soil, Building Equity. We started Accelerating Appalachia in 2013. I founded it as a business accelerator to support food, fiber, and forest product production and manufacturing in the southeastern region. And we're excited to have recently been awarded a major grant, and we're going to get into some of the Building Soil, Building Equity program. But right now, I would like to have my team introduce themselves, tell them a little bit about how you will engage with them if you become part of our program.
Awesome. Well, nice to meet everybody. My name is Lachey Robinson. I'm the Chief Communications Officer here at Accelerating Appalachia. I personally feel like I get to do all the fun stuff here. So all of the social media posts, cool photos, I'm probably behind those. If you've received an email communication, I'm probably behind that as well.
Thanks, Lachey. John?
My name's John Moore, and I'm the Chief Database Officer, or Chief Data Officer for Accelerating Apple, as well as sort of the professional plate spinner. So I end up doing a lot of the data collection, as well as some of the finance and whatnot. Basically, if you're doing anything that needs an egghead, you'll probably be in contact with me.
Oh, I wanted to note that John is in Pound, Virginia, which is very far Western Virginia, and Lachey is in Richmond, Kentucky. I'm in Lexington, Kentucky.
I'm Brittany Holbrook. I'm also in Lexington, Kentucky. I'm the Executive Support Associate. So I do some of the behind the scenes stuff. I may not work with you directly, but you may see my name from time to time.
And we have Tanya Smith on the line, although she's not on video. Tanya, you want to just give a little bit of background on yourself?
Yeah, sorry. I'm in Bowling Green right now, and so I'm calling from I'm in on my phone. So yes, I have done cooperative agreements with NRCS, NASDA, Kentucky Department of Agriculture, and a couple of other organizations to facilitate outreach, education, and also I work with the National NRCS Outreach and Partnership Division. So, and also work closely within the state FSA and NRCS.
And Tanya is working with us as a farmer liaison to help with the grants and budget for farmers. So, as I was mentioning, we went from rags to riches. We went from a very small budget, but a very impactful program, and we're awarded $20 million in April of 2023 from the USDA. It's a Climate Smart Commodities grant, and we have spent the last, I guess it was about 7 months in developing the program, and launched our applications in December, and we got a pretty impressive turnout of applicants to the program. Our program is broken out into 12 million in cash incentives for the farmer and 6 million in training from industry leaders in regenerative agriculture. I am going to note that I just accidentally skipped one of our very important partners, because we have multiple partners on this project, who is on the line, and that is Tyler Jenkins with the National Center for Appropriate Technology. And he's going to get into some of the services that they provide. But I just wanted John to have the opportunity to introduce himself, as well as Brad Clark. And I'm already just a little embarrassed that I missed some very important folks here.
Sure. Yeah, as Sarah said, I'm Tyler. I'm a member of the technical assistance team for NCAT, or the National Center for Appropriate Technology. and we'll be helping out with some of the farm planning and implementation aspects of it.
And I'm Brad Clark. I'm based here in Lexington, Kentucky, but all my people are from further east in Kentucky and then southern West Virginia. And so I'll be moderating the Q&A and monitoring the chat box. And happy to be here with you all.
Great, thanks. So building soil building equity and overview is that we empower underserved farmers across central and southern Appalachia. And you can see we have a broad region. Yes, Appalachia at the heart of this region is critical to us, and we have focused in this region again for 10 years. We wanted to be inclusive of farmers across the board with the whole variety of geographic settings so that we can learn about what practices work in different types of farming settings. This is actually a big experiment, if you will. The USDA has called it as such, to learn over these 5 years how impactful these practices can be in drawing down carbon, increasing soil health, and we're just really excited to be a part of it. Our goal is to enroll up to 400 farmers and 65,000 acres. Everyone is expected to participate through the life of the grant, which is through March 28th, 2028.
All right, so if you're here, you may have already submitted your application, so you're probably wondering, when are you going to hear from us? So our team, we're working to approve our next group of participants in early May. And if you're approved for our program, next steps that you can expect to go through would be having your information sent over to the National Center for Appropriate Technology, which is who Tyler is representing today. You'll work with them to create a climate smart farm plan. In this climate smart farm plan, that's kind of where you'll figure out which of our 12 approved practices you'll actually implement on your farm. It's also during this step that you'll create a budget. That budget will have to be Accelerating Appalachia approved. And from there, once your budget is approved, we'll send you a soil sampling test and you're on your way.
Okay, so our progress so far, since we started the program, we've received well over 200 applicants. Actually, I think last time I checked, we were at about 240. And we've got those in our alpha pilot for starting this. Our pilot farmers are helping us to develop the VSB program. This is a learning experience because, you know, as Sarah Day had mentioned, this grant has grown the program quite substantially, and so we're learning how to move in a bigger way now within this industry. Just some little data points here of our applicants. 15% of them, a little over 15%, qualify as BIPOC, and 41% of them are also female applicant farmers. And if you're a BIPOC farmer, you qualify for an additional 20% incentive amount. And what we have down below that is our approved BSBE practices. I won't go over each of those. You can see them there, and you'll also receive a copy of these slides. Once again, just to reiterate that. So if you want to look at these numbers, you will be able to review these, as well as you can see over here in this little chart, sort of the practices of interest and what farmers who have expressed interest in this program and applied to it, what they've expressed interest in.
All right, so other key subawardees on this project include the Latent Talent Accelerator. Brad, raise your hand. We also are working with Working Trees, the National Center for Appropriate Technology, GRC Advising, Carbon Harvest, and Kentucky State University. Now I'm going to hand it over to Tyler to give you all a little bit more information about how you will work with NCAT.
Hey there. I'll just go over really quickly what our team consists of. So like I said earlier, I'm a member of a team of 6. We have 4 technical specialists and 2 sort of folks who are serving as project support staff. And you'll be assigned to one of those specialists depending on location, but really depending on your production type. And we have a really wonderful team there to support, helping you understand how to implement and kind of conceptualizing a budget for you for your plan. I'll go through briefly what you can expect from us. So once you're through the enrollment process with Accelerating Appalachia, you'll come to our side for onboarding. And really what we'll need from you in onboarding is we're going to get some information about your farm operation. We will need a map of your farm, really preferably a shape file from the FSA office. And if you don't know how to get that, we can certainly direct you to how to get that. And we're going to get information from you to help fill out your CPA 52, which is a really a holistic farm environmental assessment document of the impact of applying these practices to your land. And then we're going to help you sort of conceptualize a budget, and after all that's approved, as they said, we'll be around for ongoing technical assistance. You can reach us, text, email, phone. For the life of the program, your ag specialist will be around to answer questions that you have about that. The last thing I'll talk about is expectations that we have from you all. The biggest single most important thing you can do is to start educating yourself on the 12 approved practices for the program, and start to think about where on your farm you could apply these practices in a way that would integrate with your farming operation. We can most certainly help with the implementation and the sort of planning around, but really we're expecting that you folks will have a good idea about what you want to do on your property, being your farm after all, and we're certainly excited to help. Next thing we'll need from you is to work on a budget. As I understand it, we're maybe putting together some support pieces to help in that. But thinking about a budget for your farm and reading the guidance document, and understanding sort of what the financial requirements of the program are, asking Accelerating Appalachia through the process if you have any questions about that. Those are some of the biggest things. Like I said, we have a really expert team of folks who have a long history of farm experience and planning experience, and yeah, excited to put you in touch with those folks. That's the single biggest piece of value we can give in the program, is time with the specialists. So we'll be excited to kind of work with you on onboarding and to kind of get all that information so that we can maximize your time with that person. So.
Tyler, and something we forgot to put in here for you was that you, throughout the 4.5 years now or so, you all will be hosting farm field days across the region. And that, I think, is like where groups of farmers meet up on a farm in their region. I just think that's important to note, because that's I know you all seek to build a peer support network across the farmers.
Absolutely. Thank you for mentioning that. Yes, we will be hosting several different events across the region. We're getting ready to start planning. Think about planning the first one in the fall, and yeah, excited about those days. Those really tend to have a lot of value, both for not just for the participants, but for us. We learn a lot from those too. So yeah, thanks for lifting that up.
Thank you, Tyler.
Yeah.
That is a very brief overview of our program. We wanted to set aside the majority of the time for your questions. And unless my crew of distinguished panelists have anything else they want to add at this moment, if not, we will go ahead and begin to entertain questions. Brittany and Brad are gonna help to facilitate this part, because it looks like we might already have some questions. I'm not sure.
We do already have some questions, and I can pull from some questions that have been previously submitted by some of our participants. If you would like to add any questions to this Q&A session, Brittany has dropped in a link in the chat a couple times, and you can just fill out that form super quick, super easy, and I'll be looking at that. I'll also say that at the close of this webinar, you'll get access to these slides, so you can use those as reference, which is always nice. And we have some other supporting materials that you can get access to. So the first question from the form, in order to encourage everybody to use the form, we already have 6 acres in an EQIP grant. Are we eligible for funding still? An EQIP grant. I might have pronounced that incorrectly.
Yeah, so I feel comfortable answering that. It's going to depend on where you're receiving those funds and what for. And so if you're receiving an EQIP grant on one portion of your farm, we won't be able to support anything duplicative for that. So if you're receiving, let's say, EQIP grants for, say, fencing and infrastructure for prescribed grazing, we wouldn't be able to incentivize prescribed grazing on that same 6 acres of land. But
It can
aside
be
from
on a separate piece of
it would
land.
need to be on a separate piece of land if it was the same practice. Now, if it's a different practice, we can, but we can't duplicate funding for the same practice.
A question that came in earlier was around environmental and historical preservation acts and requirements. Will ACAP determine if there are any such requirements for the farms related to historical or environmental items?
Okay, Will, Tyler, when you all fill out the CPA 52, that that factors in at least the environmental requirements, correct?
That's right. That's right. It factors in several different acts, several different federal acts, and it's really sort of a holistic farm planning on that. I'll lift up Tammy Barnes, our specialist, who's really been kind of leading the way on our technical assistance side and kind of training and educating us on all that we need to know. And so I'll pose that question again just to make sure I didn't miss anything. But yes, the CPA 52 should cover all of that.
Great. A question just came in around potentially modifying an application that's already been turned in. For instance, this individual submitted an application focused on hedgerows, but they're also interested in reduced tillage and soil building. What would you advise that individual?
You can either resubmit your application, or if you want to reach out to us, I can reach out to you and update your application within our database, either one. Just depends on whether you want to spend, 20 minutes on the phone or 20 minutes filling out the form. But we just need to go through and either update your application on our back end, so I need to talk to you, or you'll need to resubmit it. Either one.
Great. There was a question that came in earlier around matching. And so is there any requirement of the producer, of the farmer, to have any matching funds or non-cash matching incentives of any
No,
sort?
I can answer that. No, we do have a commitment to USDA for a match, but we are raising that match.
Great, great. So hopefully that clarifies things, that this is, really trying to remove as many barriers as possible to entry
Absolutely.
into the Building Soil Building Equity Initiative. Robert Hill in the chat, I had to laugh. He asks if he's eligible for the program, being in Cleveland, because he can't spell Appalachia. And is Cleveland eligible?
Cleveland is not. I'm so sorry. With Southern Ohio and that map that shows all the counties included. Now you're just way up north there. That map is comprehensive of the area that we cover.
And I would encourage you to go to our website and click on the farmer incentives page. And on that page, there is a map and it actually lists out the specific counties in southern Ohio that we cover, as well as northern Georgia, because I know it can be a little complicated to see like exactly what county is that.
Mhm.
You just need to move into southern Ohio,
There it
Mr.
is.
Hill.
Move to Appalachia. The water's
Yeah.
fine. There was a question that came in, and Tyler, I think it's relevant to the upcoming field days that you're planning. You know, it says in the agreement that the producer is expected to attend in-person events. Is there opportunity to provide availability? How would you advise those individuals that may not have the flexibility to attend every event?
Certainly. Well, there'll be a lot of online resources and things that we post, and make sure we communicate well with folks. It's not a requirement on us that you necessarily attend the field day. Sarah Day, maybe you can speak to that if you really want folks to attend, but we will seek to have events and geographically spread out. And the reality is that not everybody can make it to everything for a variety of different reasons. So it's no specific requirement on our end.
And we of course understand that as well. We just do want to let you know that in addition to the grant funds that we provide for you implementing your practices, we also have a travel fund that will cover the costs of your travel, your meals, your hotel. So just a little extra incentive if you can make it. We've also had farmers ask, well, I can't, but can someone from my farm? Absolutely. You know, we know that you farmers are often buried and but if you've got somebody else that can attend instead, we'd welcome them.
And I'll also flag that the teams that are working on designing those field days are trying to make it so much fun and so informative and so valuable and so peer-to-peer learning sort of oriented that if you go to one, you're going to want to go to all of them, right? That's how that works. Great. Question came in around some invasive species. There's some cedar thickets, some honeysuckle. This individual wants to remove those. If approved, will this person be allowed to remove invasives while reforesting? There's some concern that some of those programs don't allow cutting and mowing.
So I'm glad you asked that because that has been a question that's come up a lot. And we're looking that under, I mean, and it sounds to me like you're looking at it under habitat establishment. Tyler, you all correct me if I'm wrong about that particular practice that is approved. We've got folks doing some real innovative things, one with cattle that appear to eat only the invasives and not the natives. But so far we haven't seen a challenge with that if it's to restore native habitat, and if it's to plant additional trees, which is often why folks are clearing, that falls into the agroforestry category. This is our pilot, so we're doing our best to help farmers address practices that have been challenging to get funded in the past. Tyler, I don't know if you have any input on that, but what I can say is we are working to try to get a definitive answer on it. And we do have some other funding in addition to the USDA. We really are trying to help to get that type of practice funded because we understand the need for it. But we are still researching the NRCS requirements. We are funded by the national USDA, but the state level NRCS offices were not. So therefore, we actually aren't able to be in touch with the state level NRC offices. But that's where NCAT has the same type of expertise. They're filling out forms that normally NRCS would. But it's a really important question. I've gone on too long about it, but it really matters to us, and we're trying to get that resolved.
And I will just say, Sarah Day, that we are getting a lot of, you know, silvopasture really would be the other one that we would see about that. And I know we're still waiting for a specific determination about, you know, just how much you guys want to see in sort of new tree establishment versus silvopasture management. But I think we are going to get a lot of questions, particularly in Appalachia, about people who are already raising livestock. And so them wanting to add silvopasture will really be more kind of like the case. I'm just presuming right now that this person wants to clear out their understory, thin out some trees. You'll get healthier trees and also some grazing land that you wouldn't have had before. So,
and so my input on that question, just to make it a committee responding to this, would be that all the practices implemented as part of this program are supposed to be done to NRCS standards. So as long as NRCS standards allow thinning as part of this habitat management, then you can do that. It's just NRCS standards. Long answer short. So, and that's something that I would have to defer once again to Tyler for, because I'm not privy to NRCS standards, but that's sort of the answer. It depends.
I have a couple questions related to some of the practices. So can a producer or farmer get paid for practices that have already been implemented, such as prescribed grazing?
So
You've already implemented them.
Yeah, the only thing we can do regarding if a practice has already been implemented is an enhancement on the practice. And so it has to be in furtherance of enhancing the carbon drawdown or reducing the environmental impact of that practice further. So, you know, if you've received an EQIP grant to put in an irrigation system for prescribed grazing, and I'll just use that as an example, and you did that a couple years ago, and now you want to increase the frequency of grazing rotation, then we could, you know, pay for fencing or help, you know, you could use our funding for that. But it can't be, once again, duplicative. We can't do duplicative funding, and it has to be an enhancement. There has to be an expense as part of this program associated with why you're receiving that money.
That's great.
And the logic, I just want to note the
please.
logic behind that is that, again, this is a 4.5-year experiment where we are tracking across the board with actually, you know, thousands of farmers across the country participating, the impact of these practices. So at the end of the program, we're going to have a huge set of data. And so that's why you have to start with a baseline sample, and we track that moving forward.
So also relevant to the practices, I know that there were a couple questions that came in prior to the webinar around what are those practices? Where can I see that list? Whenever you get the slide deck, we did list some of those out, right? So that you can see that. There was a question around how, like, what is the timeline allowed to implement a practice? Does anybody want to speak to that?
So regarding the timeline allowed to implement a practice, the way that we're currently structuring the program and the incentive payments is, unless you're eligible for an advance, you're paid, you'll receive implementation payment after it's implemented. So there really is no timeline, but obviously we'd like to see you get it in as soon as possible so we can start measuring results. As for an advance, if you receive advance payments, there is an expectation that if we do pay you in advance for you to get the supplies to implement a practice, say fence posts or whatever, or irrigation pipe, we do expect you to liquidate those funds within a certain period of time. And I'd have to look at our documentation to see exactly how many days it is, because it's been a while. But unless you receive an advance, it's really on you to get that implemented, so then we can get you paid.
But I do need to emphasize, we do again, the seasonality is clearly going to dictate. We've got folks coming in the summer when they're in the midst of, we recognize, the different planting seasons, but when the season arises that's a fit for your planting, we do really want you to get that in the ground, because again, one of the goals of this is to measure impact over time, and carbon impact especially, typically that takes a number of years. And I think everybody's kind of aware that 4.5 years really isn't a lot of time when it comes to measuring. So we want to see those in the ground as soon as possible.
What is required for receipts? How should producers document labor for themselves, for the hired staff and labor? How might they value labor? So I think there's a labor question there, and there's a receipt question there as well.
We allow up to 30% for labor.
Great.
And you do need to keep your receipts.
Yeah.
There will be spot checks. We don't ask you to submit them, but you do need to keep them, because we will be doing spot checks.
And then will invoices be submitted as
Yes.
part of that billing process? Yeah.
Yes, and Tanya, maybe she wants to chime in real quick, because that's something Tanya has done a lot with farmers through NRCS grants. And we're mirroring a lot of those practices.
Yes. As far as if you could put together a project budget, just sort of itemized list of your purchases and your time, your labor, and also what Sarah Day included, the 30% for labor, and submit that. But as she also said, I want to reiterate, is to also keep your receipts. If you get an itemized budget from whomever you're working with the store merchant, that's great, because that just verifies your purchases. But the main source is always itemize things that you do on a Word doc, a Excel sheet, and also keep your receipts for backup, just to verify that you did purchase these things, and also to submit to John so he has verification as well.
Great.
Thank you, Tanya.
Questions are really starting to come in, so I might try to speed us up a little bit so that I can address all of them. Sorry. So, once a producer is enrolled, the CPA 52 is completed, right? Because that's a really important element of the enrollment process. When can producers begin to send quotes and/or invoices in for work projects?
They'll need to prepare a budget, and that's in conjunction with NCAT and us, and we'll be reviewing those budgets. Those budgets will need to include your estimates, your invoice estimates.
Yeah. So, and to get a little more granular with that, once we receive your budget that you've outlined, if you qualify for an advance, then we can go ahead and advance you a fixed amount of cash, a certain amount of cash. It's a percentage of the total amount that you're eligible for. If you're not eligible for an advance, you'll be able to invoices for that, or basically tell us how much you spent, and get paid for that once you've implemented the practice.
And all of this will be in consultation with the NCAT team and ACAP folks. So we're not expecting you to commit all this to memory at this point, but just to clarify that you're going to have a lot of support along the way, but there are clear steps that have.
And for further clarification with advances, the way we've got it structured is that basically we've set it up so that small farms that don't have a lot of revenue, say you've got a small farm that has $20,000 in revenue. It's just, you've got a full-time job on the side of it or whatever. If you have $10,000, say, in expenses to implement the thing, you would qualify for advance payment to help offset that high startup cost.
And that formula, John, if you want to explain the formula for what qualifies you to apply for an advance.
Yeah. So how we have it structured right now is if your implementation cost is more than 50% of your farm revenue, you qualify for an advance. And I know 50% sounds high. The reason for that is we're trying to make sure that we keep these advance funds for small farmers who have, compared to their revenue, prohibitively high startup costs for getting into regenerative agriculture. So we really want to lift up these small and underserved farmers. And so that's sort of the reasoning behind that. But
And we
50%.
have a lot of small underserved farmers with minimal revenues.
Yeah.
75%, we're committed to supporting 75% underserved farmers. So, and
Yeah.
naturally, that's the way the applications
Yeah.
are coming in with very small,
Yeah.
small revenues. So,
And if I could connect a dot there, if we come back to what those field days might look like, if there's a high number of smaller farms and farms that match the description that Sarah Day and John provided, that creates a nice community of farmers that might be facing similar challenges, right? And so we want to make sure that we're supporting that whole process and the community building that sits back behind this building soil building equity initiative. So there's a cluster of questions here from one individual. Who determines what we do on our land? I'm interested in wildlife habitat. Who would help us determine how to implement some of those practices?
Tyler, that's a you question.
Yes. So no one will tell you what to do on your land. We'll certainly educate you on the practices that are in the program. You'll decide. So if you're interested in wildlife habitat, you'll tell us, you'll send us your FSA map, tell us what parcel, kind of give us an idea of what you're thinking about doing. And you don't have to, be, need to have a pretty good idea, but certainly people come and ask for, advice. And that's what we're here to do, talk you through if you're going to implement silvopasture or implement wildlife management, that kind of stuff. So.
Great, super helpful. Another question concerning fences, are there specifications governing what kind of fence you can build, or can this individual build the kind of fence that they know is effective for controlling the livestock?
So if I could respond to that, once again, these practices are implemented to an NRCS standard. So as long as they meet NRCS standard, and I'm not the expert on what NRCS standards are, but I know that these are required to be NRCS standard. And so if, say, for instance, temporary fencing versus perimeter fences versus doing permanent fencing on the perimeter and then temporary fencing in the middle to create paddocks, ever how you want to structure that, as long as that falls within NRCS standards, it's allowable.
I feel like that might be a question because it's come up a lot that we might send up to the national USDA folks so we can get a definitive answer from them since we can't communicate with the national folks. I mean, the state folks. Tyler might know. I mean, it's in the regulations. And
Tyler, do you know if there are any restrictions on types of fencing for the implementation of like prescribed grazing?
I don't, but that doesn't mean there aren't. I will ask Tammy or Eddie, who will know more.
Tanya, do you know?
I don't know the restrictions right off the top of my hand, but I do have the outlines of the required fencing that they do during the demonstration that I could send you. You could follow up with everyone on.
Okay, that'd be great. We could include that in this questionnaire, and I'm happy to also put that question before our point of contact with the federal folks.
What should a producer have in hand or submit to affirm the control of the leased land for the duration of the contract period?
So is the question, what do they need to share with us to confirm that they have control over the leased land?
For the duration of
the program. So any sort of contract, if you have a contract that you can submit to us, I mean, that's great. I think at this point, we're not actually requiring anyone to submit the contracts for their leases. We're just requiring that you self-verify that you will have control. So like on the application, we're not asking you to submit that, but we do ask that you verify that you do have control over the land. And that's a contractual obligation as part of the contract, that you do have to agree and verify that you have control over the land for the next, for the duration of the program.
Either
There
through
was
a lease or ownership.
There were a couple questions kind of related to, what is the duration of the program? And I'm just going to jump ahead and answer for the panel that March 31st, 2028 is sort of the end date of sort of what we're looking at over this period of time.
That's when the grant funding runs out. And unless they refund this, we're just trying to make hay while we can.
Yeah. Now, I know that this is in early stage pilot development with this very first cohort, and there's a second cohort on the way, and there are people that are interested in applying. We have quite a few people that have applied for this. But there were several questions that were speaking to sort of what the time commitment might look and feel like for a farmer that is participating in this. And I know that this response might be a little high level right now because of sort of how early this initiative is in implementation. But can anybody speak to sort of like what types of things might people need to commit time to doing? What might that look and feel like, even if it's just sort of in estimates?
Yeah, so I'm comfortable talking to that. As far as the time commitment goes, obviously, once you join the program, we're going to send you over to NCAT, and NCAT's going to train you in the implementation of these practices. And there's going to be a little bit of legwork and time involved in planning the farm, doing a carbon plan, basically, or something like that. Once you're in the program and enrolled, basically it's just going to be a rinse, wipe, and repeat of, we're going to do annual soil sampling. So we need to measure your carbon year over year on your farm. And we're also going to need information on commodity sales. So if you grew corn and you sold so many bushels of corn, we need to know how much you sold and what you sold it for. And I think that's pretty much it. So we're going to need to know just sales data, a little bit of sales data. Prices are included in that. And then carbon reporting. So soil reporting. So I know that doesn't give you an exact measure of time. It just depends on how many acres you've got and how long you're going to take to pull a soil probe and pull a sample.
Well, and to be clear, no matter when you sign up, you have to commit through March 31st, 2028. Or our goal is to get the majority of farmers signed up in this first year, so that we can gather as much data on the impacts over time as possible.
So if there are any other questions that our participants on this call might have, I see that the sort of questions in the form are starting to slow down. If you want to use the chat function as well, if that's easier for you, if you have any remaining questions that you want to park there. As our panelists sort of think about the conversations we've had, any other questions that you all have heard? Is there anything else that you want to share with the participants on this call while we're waiting on maybe a couple last minute questions to come in? Put the panelist on the spot. I'm ad-libbing, improv.
I just want to note that I'm glad to see Tammy Barnes on here. She's
Mm-hmm.
based in Kentucky, and Tammy is with NCAT and has extensive experience with USDA projects. And she's saying no restrictions, especially on interior fencing. Temporary electric is very typical. All producers should have good perimeter fencing. There may be some folks on here by phone that can't see the chat, so I wanted to read that out loud.
Great.
I did want to clarify and this is an NCAT thing, but just to note that the field days, they're designing them for parts of the region. So for instance, if you're in Kentucky and there's a field day down in northern Georgia, that's a hike. That's not how they're designing this. It's so that you have, you can get there in part of a day, trying to keep it close to you. They've got, a team of 4 or 5 folks to help host these. Am I correct, Tyler?
That's right. That's right. And
Okay.
so depending on where folks are in the region, and certainly we hope some farmers from the cohort will have some good examples, maybe can serve as our host sites. And we can generate some good community that way. So yes, that's correct.
And
Other thing that I want to note is that our organization, Accelerating Appalachia, will be hosting an invite-only conference for the farmers as well as our network of mentors, advisors, investors, lenders. Over these 10 years, we've built a pretty significant network to support farmers and wholesale producers. So we will have at least one conference of that nature during the project, hopefully two. We don't want to waste anybody's time. So we're trying to make these conferences very, very focused on the farmer. But it's a great opportunity to meet the other farmers and then get, advice, guidance. And if you're interested in funding, beyond the funding that we have that. We also have a directory that is something that I worked on over 4 or 5 years with a whole variety of resources that will be made available to you if you join the program.
And I'll also flag just a couple of other things. The team, and especially Lachey, have done a great job in putting together a welcome packet that is very thorough and helps to onboard and clarify questions that have emerged over the past few months for the producers that have applied and and starting the enrollment process. There's FAQ. I think Lachey, you might have dropped that link up in the chat a little bit further up. Do you want to speak to any of those items?
No, that was not the FAQ link.
Okay.
That is something that we're still working on. This call is actually going to help us in developing that web page. So make sure you keep coming back to our website to check that out. The link that I put in there, it was because someone had asked what the practices were. And so that page just had the practices listed out, which you will be getting a copy of this presentation, but that's why I put that link in there.
And then Tyler and his team at NCAT are also putting together some resources and some primers on each of the practices, and some quick consumable. You all are busy. Everybody on this call knows that. Everybody on the panel knows that. Everybody across the sub-awards know that, and we want to respect that. And so there are some resources that are being compiled right now that we're really, really excited about.
That's right. Single biggest thing I think that can help is if you start educating yourselves on the practices and about where you might want to implement them on the farm. And we're putting together some resources to that effect that should help with that. And of course, I think ACAP has a 2-page cheat sheet we have about those that they can send out as well. So,
yep. And then a couple things that are happening in the chat. The NRCS fencing standards hyperlink was dropped by Tanya. Thank you for that. There's a new question that came in, if I may.
Yeah, I saw. Is that the new farmer?
Yeah, a new farmer asked about help setting up their farm, and especially interested in talking with and learning from other experienced farmers.
I just want to note that, yes, we want to encourage new farmers, and we do encourage new farmers. There will have to be a 10-acre or more commitment, and that 10 acres will need to focus on agroforestry. The rationale behind this is, again, one of the purposes of this program, the reason that it was created by USDA was to enable as much carbon drawdown as possible over these years. We're really enlisting farmers in the battle to keep carbon in the ground where it belongs. And so we have to look at our commitment to drawdown. Agroforestry is significant. So if it's going to be a small acreage, we're going to need some significant drawdown. I don't want to discourage you, Taryn. I just want you to be aware of some of this criteria.
Let me do one last round of checks to see if any last minute questions have come in. It doesn't look like it. We want to thank you for being here tonight and being a part of this conversation as it evolves. You're in at the beginning, and that's super exciting. And as you can see with everybody on this team, very collaborative, very focused on problem solving. I think maybe one did come in here. Someone would really like to talk to new farmers. You know, whenever they started being a soldier leader, and is happy to help. Eric's happy to help to sort of maybe what not to do in the beginning, right? And so if anybody wants to reach out, we could probably connect those dots, right?
I think that's great, Eric. Thank you. We do have a small but growing farmer advisory panel of experienced farmers. Love seeing that. We definitely want to make sure we have your information. And Lachey, yes, you're going to be part of a speed dating event coming up. Correct?
Yeah, so I wanted to bring that up because while we do
For
have
climate smart agriculture.
yes, not regular dating, for this project. But yes, I wanted to bring that up because while we do have a 10-acre minimum for building soil building equity, there might be another project that has been funded by the USDA's Partnerships for Climate Smart Commodities. So there are a number of different projects who have received this grant, but every project kind of has like a different tweak. And so if you're not a good fit for our program, I would encourage you, May 3rd, next Friday, here in Richmond at the Madison County Library, there will be a speed dating event, and I'll share more details about that on social media. So turn your notifications on for us. Like, share, follow.
And you know, whenever people have applied to the to participate, even if they're not eligible, there are all kinds of resources because we're doing this work that we're aware of, right? That ACAP's aware of, that NCAT's aware of. And Lachey has done a great job of compiling those. She puts things out on social media across multiple platforms. So be sure to follow Accelerating Appalachia and look for Building Soil Building Equity. There's also some mailing lists that you can get on as emails go out. And if for some reason now is not the right time for you to apply, that doesn't mean it won't be next year or in the fall. And so this is an inclusive process. We want everybody to come along for this journey. Sarah Day, I'm gonna give you the last word if nobody else has anything else to offer.
Okay, well, I want to, speaking of matching, if we could put Eric and Taryn in touch with one another, just a
Okay.
thought here. To close out, I want to also mention that there are multiple projects, climate smart projects across the country. There are 140 funded organizations like ours, a number of them in our region. We are not in competition with them, in addition to other NRCS conservation grants. What USDA has said is that they haven't even limited it to tract. They're saying the funding cannot be applied to the same piece of land. Those are their words. So in other words, if you have one climate smart grant in the same tract of land next to another climate smart grant, that is acceptable. And you can learn about who else is funded on the Climate Smart Commodities website, the Partnership for Climate Smart Commodities. Just Google that and you'll see all the different projects. But we want to encourage as many folks as possible to get funding for this project. And I just want to thank you all so much for being here and being a part of this. And we are just super excited after these many years that, like we like to say, the funding finally caught up with the vision, and we really are excited to work with you. please be in touch. If you have any other questions for us, you will be receiving a follow-up with this information. I want to thank our awesome team of folks. And again, we're here for you if you have any questions, and look forward to working with you.
All right, y'all have a great night. Thanks,
Thanks,
everybody.
everybody.
Good night.
Night.